Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more. When I was about 12, there was a Halloween when my parents decided to go out for the evening, avoiding the usual trick-or-treat routine. I was the youngest of 4 kids. My 2 older sisters resembled our mom with fair skin and red hair, while my brother and other sister took after our dad, with dark features. We were an interesting mix of both sides of the family. As the evening drew closer, my parents prepared to leave, checking in on our plans. My sisters were hosting their boyfriends to help with the trick-or-treaters, which was fine with our parents since they knew and trusted them. My brother planned to go to the movies with his friends, and I wanted to go out to collect candy. My mom agreed to all our plans, assigning me a curfew and asking my sisters to help me with my costume. Once my parents left, I knew my sisters would be too distracted with their boyfriends to enforce my curfew, which suited me just fine. The next challenge was finding a costume. We didn't buy store-bought costumes, and our outfits were always homemade, thanks to my creative sisters. However, this time they seemed frustrated about having to spend time on my costume and quickly started putting it together. They handed me some of Mom's clothes, and although I hesitated, I eventually went along with it. After dressing up, I was surprised by how much I resembled my mom. My sisters were equally impressed with how much I looked like her, and we spent a while admiring the transformation. My hair and makeup added to the effect, and I felt a strange sense of pride in how the costume turned out. The experience was both fun and surreal, and I found myself enjoying the new look. As I stood on the porch, ready to head out, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement about the whole adventure. The soft clothing, the way it fit, and the sensation of it all, it felt different, but also exciting. I was starting to enjoy being part of this new experience. As I stepped off the porch and onto the sidewalk, still adjusting to the heels, I noticed something both strange and intriguing. No one was paying attention to me. There were no compliments on my costume, no teasing from neighbors, just a young girl walking down the street with a shopping bag in hand, which could easily have been mistaken for a purse. I'll explain why I'm sure of that in a moment. I walked the 5 blocks to where I was meeting my friends, and found myself captivated by the movement of my hips and the gentle sway of my body. For a brief moment, I felt oddly confident and aware of my new appearance. Thoughts and feelings I hadn't experienced before began to surface, like the urge to draw attention in a playful way. Though I didn't fully understand it, I was aware that I now shared some of the same secrets as the older girls I had observed. As I strolled toward my friends, I noticed a few passing honks and whistles, but soon enough, I reached the group of familiar faces dressed as clowns, pirates, spacemen, and various other characters. No one recognized me at first, which led to some confusion and surprised stares. It took a few moments before they realized it was me, and then, like the playful boys they were, they started teasing me, lifting my dress and laughing. I quickly pulled it down, trying to act casual, though I was slightly embarrassed, especially since they had seen more than I intended. After the teasing died down, we discussed our trick-or-treat strategy, which basically meant mapping out the best routes for collecting candy. The walk took us even further from my neighborhood, but I was enjoying the adventure and getting more comfortable in my heels. Now, here's where I explain why people thought my bag was a purse. At most of the houses, my friends were greeted with candy, while I often faced closed doors. Initially, I couldn't understand why and felt too shy to knock again. Eventually, I started moving in front of the boys to ensure I was first in line for the treats, though I noticed some strange looks along the way. At one house, an elderly woman gave candy to the boys, then turned to me with a smile. "You know, young lady, it's so sweet of you to help out with the younger children," she said. "Are they all your brothers?" I smiled and played along, enjoying the conversation more than the candy. "Oh, no, just the one dressed as a clown. The others are his friends. I told their mothers I'd keep an eye on Tommy, and they were happy for the help." It was in that moment that I realized I was having more fun pretending than anything else, even though I was still collecting candy. That's nice. Mothers can use all the help they can get, especially today, what with all the trouble youngsters seem to be getting into. God knows what it will be like when you're ready to have kids. She offered, raising her eyes to the sky as if whispering a prayer for my future motherhood. On another day, I might have joined my friends in teasing and taunting this little old lady, but tonight, I liked her, and I liked her thinking me a future young mother. It was weird. Even to me. I noticed my friends moving on to the second house away from where I stood, and thought I'd better end this and catch up. Well, better catch up to the little troublemakers before they get too far ahead. It was nice talking to you, I said, showing my devotion to my responsibilities, and bringing an end to the conversation at the same time, but it had an unexpected side effect as well. What's your name, young lady? The lady asked as I started to turn away. I turned back to her and said the first girl name that came into my head. Emily, I said, still playing the game. Well, Emily, I have been looking for a young lady to help out around the house on Saturdays with cleaning and such, and you seem very responsible. I would pay $5 an hour for probably 3 or 4 hours on Saturdays. That, by the way, was a fortune back in the early 60s. Would you be interested? She asked. I was flabbergasted. I quickly calculated in my head and all I saw was $15 or even $20 for a few hours' work, and answered without thinking. Yes, I would. I said excitedly. Good. Come see me next Saturday morning, and we'll talk, she said, grasping my hand softly, then retreating inside and closing the door. I didn't even think about the implications of her hiring Emily at first. The very first thing I thought of was how soft her skin was to the touch, even at her age. And how gentle it was. More like someone wrapping your hand with a big cotton ball than holding it in their hand. How wonderful it must be to be a woman all the time and have such silky soft skin. And wear such soft and pretty underthings all the time, I thought. Then I remembered my friends and wanted to tell them what happened, but looking down the street, they were nowhere to be seen. They had left me, and I was probably near 15 blocks from home. Oh boy. I wasn't really worried, though it was completely dark now, and I seemed to have lost my interest in trick-or-treating anyway. I had fallen deeper and deeper into the Emily persona my sisters had created, and as I walked slowly toward home, the only thing I thought about was how I could lay claim to that nice little old lady's offer of a Saturday job. There was still the occasional trick-or-treater, but they became fewer and farther between as I meandered on my way, often turning down streets I had not been on before just so I could extend my walk a bit more. The remainder of my stroll through the night as Emily was practically uneventful, except I was maybe 8 blocks from home now when I saw a group of teenage boys, probably around my brother's age, coming toward me on the same sidewalk. They weren't particularly menacing or anything like that, but it did appear they were a little tipsy. It was fairly common around this time for the older teens, especially the boys, to finagle themselves some beer or other alcoholic drink and get drunk. I hadn't tried that yet, but I knew my brother had several times, so I was aware of it, and not really worried about these boys. I guess I had forgotten for the moment that I was Emily. As they approached, they too were fooled by the magic my sisters had worked, because they started to whistle and say things like, "Hey baby, where you goin', and wanna come have a drink with us?" And though the thought of being accosted was totally foreign to me, I did feel this odd indignation and an urge to turn my pretty powdered nose up at them. In fact, I did just that as I tried to walk past them on the inside of the sidewalk. "Oh, don't be like that. What's your name, babydoll?" said the boldest of them as he pinned me against some hedges and put his arm around my waist, drawing me to him. "None of your business. Now let go of me," I demanded as his other arm came around my waist as well, and he pulled me very close to him, to the point where my pointy chests were pressed against his chest, and his face was inches from mine. I struggled a bit, but I still wasn't thinking about being violated, so my struggles were minimal, as if against some minor annoyance, and he easily held me fast. "Ah, come on baby doll. I'm just trying to be friends. Give me a little kiss, he said, his lips coming less than an inch from mine, and his hands sliding up and down the back of my dress. I know he was enjoying the sensation of soft skin beneath layers of nylon because I was too. I wasn't aware that he had worked my dress and slip up my thighs slowly till I felt the coolness of the October night air on my thighs above the stocking tops, and realized his hands were cupping my prettily panted bottom while his fingers played with the lace ruffles. I was mortified, and now started to be scared. All at once, I was aware of everything. This boy who had me exposed and trapped. His friends who watched hungrily, but silently. The empty darkness of the street. Everything. I was totally incapable of reaction. My mind was outside my body, and it too was watching in silence. I saw myself groped and pinched, cupped and caressed, and one of the silent watchers even approached to feel my chests. I was frightened but actually enjoyed my predicament as much as they did. That was part of what frightened me so much, I guess. I know I liked the feel of hands all over me, and even to a point, the sensation of helplessness. It never occurred to me to tell them I was a boy. I'm sure I wasn't even thinking like one at the moment. There was no repulsion at being groped by other boys, only at being groped. And even that wasn't really repulsion. Had it been just one boy, I might not have been feeling the mixture of embarrassed pleasure and helpless fear that I was feeling. Only embarrassed pleasure, but as it was, there were just too many boys trying to get at me. I started to tremble a bit, and the boy holding me tightly became less rough, even gentle. "Hey, we're just playing baby doll. Don't be frightened," he said softly, trying to calm me. "Back off," he said to the other boys, who had witnessed the exchange, and had already begun to do so. I guess in fear that I might scream or something. They weren't really a gang or anything. Just a group of teenage boys who were a little drunk, and very afraid of getting into trouble. My dress was allowed to fall back down into place, though my slip was still bunched up around my bottom, and the boy holding me relaxed his grip. I was still nervous but no longer to the point where I was trembling, and he smiled sweetly at me. "See, I wouldn't hurt a pretty little thing like you," he said, trying to show me he was not a hoodlum. "I just want to be friends. Now, how about a kiss and you tell me your name?" "I'm Jack," he said, hoping that by introducing himself, I might reciprocate with my own name. "No, I don't want to kiss you. You're being mean," I pouted, though secretly, I didn't mind the idea of a kiss. I was just starting to play along with the situation. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'll be good. Just one little kiss, please," he teased. "Then will you let go of me?" I asked, keeping the playful back and forth going. "I promise. One kiss, and then I'll let you go," he swore, raising his hand dramatically like he was making a vow. What else could I do? I leaned in and kissed him. I meant to kiss his cheek, but he quickly turned so that my lips met his. He tightened his grip as his tongue slipped into my mouth. I was taken aback for a moment, but I relaxed and found myself caught up in the moment, enjoying the unexpected connection. His friends had moved a little further away, but I knew they were watching with smiles on their faces. To them, Jack had succeeded. He was the center of attention for having kissed the girl in the slip and panties. After what felt like a long kiss, Jack pulled back and asked for my name again. I nervously replied with the name I had told the older lady earlier. "Emily," I whispered, feeling a little embarrassed about how easily I had given in. "That's a beautiful name. Can I see you again, Emily? Maybe a movie?" he asked, his desire to see me more clearly about Emily, not the real me. The situation was becoming more complicated, especially since I did want to see him again, just not with his friends around. "I'll be in this neighborhood next Saturday," I said, giving him a shy smile. I told him the address of the little old lady and explained that I'd be helping her that day, though I wasn't sure how I'd manage it. Jack smiled broadly and promised he would wait all day if necessary. Then, I turned playful again and told him to stand between his friends and me so I could fix my dress. He complied, but I caught him peeking as I adjusted my slip. I pretended to be annoyed, continuing my adjustment anyway. "Stop that, or I won't go to the movies with you," I said, trying to sound firm. All right, he laughed,
clearly enjoying my teasing and relieved that I had agreed to the movie invitation, even if it was more by default. "Okay. You can turn around now," I said after adjusting my dress, which he did just as I was about to leave. But before I could go, he gently caught my arm, turned me back to him, and before I could react, he kissed me again. "See you next Saturday, Emily," he said with a smile, clearly satisfied with his kiss, and then he turned to join his friends. "See you next Saturday, Jack," I said softly, giving a small wave as he walked away. "I hope," I thought to myself as I headed home, already thinking about how I could make it happen. The next few days would be spent figuring it out. That night had been full of unexpected realizations. When I got home, I didn't even try to change back right away. I felt so comfortable as Emily that my sister's boyfriends playfully flirted with me. I couldn't help but wonder if they were pretending or if something more was in their eyes. After a bit of flirtation, which I played along with, I went upstairs to my room, still dressed in my costume, and sat in the dark, reflecting on the night. I didn't want to stop being Emily. I liked every part of the night, even the attention and kisses. Before I knew it, morning had arrived, and I was still Emily. I reluctantly changed, but as I looked at myself in the mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling of femininity that lingered. I wanted to find a way to be Emily again, not just for Halloween but for other reasons too, like meeting Jack at the movies. I washed my face and got dressed, a little sad to change back. I realized I would need help to make this happen again, so I turned to my sister Jay. She was resourceful and adventurous, and I knew she'd enjoy the challenge. I didn't mention the kiss or the attention I'd gotten. That was my secret. I just told her about the job with the old woman. Jay was intrigued by the idea of keeping up the ruse with the old lady. We had 5 days to plan, and we started working on a story for our parents. The plan involved me being away on Saturday to help the lady, but we kept the details simple, no mention of her thinking I was Emily. Dad was fine with the idea, thinking it was a great opportunity for me, and we didn't need to provide too many details since it was with a harmless old woman. By Thursday, everything was set. Jay had arranged with her boyfriend, M, to use his apartment for my transformation on Saturday morning. After that, M would drive me to the old lady's house. He was all in on the plan, and I couldn't contain my excitement. The thought of becoming Emily again and meeting Jack was thrilling, and I blushed, realizing I might want to be more than just his acquaintance. Jay initially planned for me to wear a blouse and slacks, thinking I'd be doing some work for the old lady. It took some convincing, but I finally persuaded her to switch to a dress and heels to keep up the illusion. I knew it would be a little tricky, but I didn't want to take any chances if Jack showed up. I wanted to be in something feminine and pretty, with all the little details that made me feel like Emily. Was I really feeling this way? Yes, I was. I barely slept on Friday night, and Jay was a little annoyed when she saw my puffy eyes. I explained that I had tried to sleep, but couldn't, and she seemed to understand. "All right," she said, "we can cover up the puffiness with some extra eye makeup and shadow. I even got you false eyelashes. You're going to look even better than you did on Halloween," she said with a smile. I took a deep breath at the thought. It felt exciting. I would be even more attractive to Jack than I was that night. It would be hard for him to resist, but I knew I had to keep my boundaries clear. When we arrived at MS, all of Emily's clothes were laid out in his bedroom. Jay told me to get dressed, and she'd do my hair and makeup afterward. I knew how to dress myself from Halloween, so it wasn't too difficult, except for attaching the stockings to my corset's garters. Once that was done, the lace-trimmed petticoat, dress, and heels were a breeze. I stepped into the living room, and both Em and Jay nodded in approval. I already felt wonderfully feminine, even though my hair and makeup weren't done yet. "Hurry and sit down here. I need to get back to the house soon," Jay ordered. I quickly sat down, smoothing my dress, and she started working on my hair and makeup. In about half an hour, my hair was styled, my makeup done, and a spritz of Jay's perfume added. She was on her way home, leaving Em and me to finish our preparations. Em would drive me to the old lady's house after watching the morning news for a bit. I just sat there, enjoying the feeling of being feminine, making sure I sat with my knees together for modesty. It felt like good practice. When Em dropped me off and drove away, I suddenly felt nervous. I was in an unfamiliar neighborhood, in a dress and heels, and no one who knew my secret was nearby. I couldn't just stand there, so I steeled myself and walked up the stairs to the old lady's door, knocking when I arrived. "Well, hello Emily. I've been waiting for you," she said with a warm smile. "By the way, you can call me Miss Eleanor, all right?" she added. "Okay, Miss Eleanor," I replied, feeling a little embarrassed as I noticed myself making a small curtsy without thinking. I was really starting to feel like Emily. "Come on in, Emily, and we'll have some tea while we talk about the things I need help with," she said. "I see you wore a dress today. That's fine, but next week, maybe you could wear something more suited for a little work," she added with a smile. "Of course, Miss Eleanor," I replied. I didn't know what to wear, so I chose a dress. "I'll wear slacks next time," I promised, not adding that I had worn the dress on purpose, hoping Jack might show up. "That's fine, dear. Let's sit in the kitchen. We girls just feel at home there," she said as we made our way through the hallway. I loved the way she made me feel included in the world of women. In that moment, it felt like the place I belonged. "Today, we're going to do some shopping," Miss Eleanor continued. "I need to stock up the freezer, and carrying all those groceries wears me out. So, you'll help me with that today, okay?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. It made me nervous. I'd be out all day in my dress. It felt both exciting and a little intimidating. But I didn't have a choice. I couldn't go back to MS to change until at least 4:30 p.m., and it was only 10 a.m. After some tea and chatting, we got into Miss Eleanor's car and headed to the market. She preferred the old farmer's market outside of town to the larger supermarkets near her house, so we had a nice, quiet ride while she talked about all sorts of things women talk about. I felt like I was being let in on a secret, knowing she'd probably never talk about these things with a boy. We arrived at the market and did the shopping, mostly canned goods and some meats for the freezer. No one at the market seemed to notice me, except for a few teenage boys, whose looks made me feel a little self-conscious. Occasionally, I caught the eyes of older men who stared at my legs or hips, which made me nervous, but I stayed close to Miss Eleanor, and no one got too bold. I was just happy that no one seemed to suspect my true identity. After loading the groceries into the trunk, which earned me a whistle, we began the drive back to the city. "So tell me, Emily, does a pretty girl like you have a boyfriend?" Miss Eleanor asked with a knowing smile. My cheeks flushed, and unsure how to respond, I just smiled nervously and started smoothing my dress. She noticed my hesitation but seemed genuinely curious, so she asked his name. "Jack," I blurted out. I hadn't planned on telling anyone about Jack, especially not Miss Eleanor, but she was so friendly that I found myself opening up without meaning to. "I met him last weekend at a Halloween party," I added, suddenly feeling shy. "He's really cute, and he kissed me." Oh no. I knew I had said too much. Young love, or maybe just young infatuation. "You're too young for love, I'm sure," she said, her tone shifting to a more motherly one. "Well, I'm probably too young for anything serious, but I really liked it when he kissed me," I replied with a grin, still feeling a slight blush on my cheeks. She seemed to find that adorable. "I know," she said kindly. "Boys can be wonderful at your age. They're not quite men yet, and they can still be sensitive and caring. Do you think you'll see him again?" I felt a little nervous. He asked me to a movie tonight, but I told him I was working and wasn't sure if I'd be done in time. "He probably won't show up anyway," I replied quietly, realizing that Emily might never see Jack again. "That's the real reason you wore a dress today, isn't it, dear?" she said, a knowing smile on her face. "Don't worry, I'm sure you'll see him again." "How can you be so sure?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Because, unless I'm mistaken, isn't that him waiting for you on my steps?" she said with a grin. Suddenly, I was filled with excitement, nerves, and a mix of emotions. It was him. I felt a rush of happiness, but also anxiety. I had no idea how to talk to him now. We were driving past him as Miss Eleanor pulled into the driveway, and there was no turning back. I felt my nerves take over, and I froze. Jack had walked up behind the car and was almost at the door by the time Miss Eleanor stopped the car. He's quite a handsome young man. I can see why you like him, Emily, she said in a low voice, almost like she was gossiping with me. Yes, he is, I whispered back, my voice barely above a murmur as Jack opened my door and offered his hand to help me out. I took his hand shyly, swung my legs out together, and stood. I was so nervous my knees were trembling. You were supposed to wait out there, I whispered to Jack as I glanced back towards the driveway entrance. I wasn't sure how Miss Eleanor would react to us. His response was to lean in when I turned my head back and steal a quick, unexpected kiss on my lips. I blushed. Stop it, I said, but I wasn't serious. You want Miss Eleanor to fire me? I added playfully, though Miss Eleanor had become somewhat of an ally in this situation. Young man, Miss Eleanor chimed in with a smile, clearly enjoying the moment. If you're going to distract my helper, you'll have to make up for it with some work. She knew full well that he wouldn't refuse the challenge. Jack, grinning widely, accepted without hesitation. It was clear he was showing off, and I couldn't help but feel giddy. I guess this must be what girls feel, silly and excited. Yes, Jack replied with a grin and a wink in my direction. I smiled, not knowing how to respond. Emily can show you what needs to be brought in after you two say hello, of course, Miss Eleanor added with a sly smile as she turned toward the house. Oh my, she had just given him permission to kiss me again. Jack's grin grew even wider as he approached me. I moved toward the open trunk of the car, the hem of my dress fluttering as I bent down to select what needed to be brought inside. Jack placed his hands on my hips as I leaned into the trunk. The touch startled me, and I instinctively turned to face him. Before I knew it, his strong arms encircled my waist, and he held me firmly as he pressed his lips to mine. I was so caught off guard that my eyes were wide open at first, but as his lips parted and his tongue gently brushed against mine, I relaxed into the kiss. My eyes closed, and I felt the softness of the moment. I kissed him back with everything I had. When he finally pulled away, I meant to say, okay, these go in the back door to the kitchen, and the canned goods go in the basement, but what came out was, oh, Jack, in a dreamy voice that I couldn't quite control. It took a moment to snap out of the daze. What a kiss that had been. I didn't think I could ever top it. As I regained my composure, I noticed Jack was watching me closely, probably enjoying the effect his kiss had on me. I smiled to myself and thought, okay, you can gloat a little on that one. Okay, these go to the kitchen, he asked, holding up 6 plastic bags, 3 in each hand. I was impressed and simply nodded. He seemed to notice me staring at his muscular arms. I'll be back for the canned goods, Emily. You can show me where they go, he chuckled. Oh no, was my first thought, being alone in the basement with him. But my second thought was, all right, they go right down here. What was happening to me? My thoughts were interrupted by Miss Eleanor, who provided a solution to my mixed emotions. Emily, would you come put away the perishables while I wash up? Your young man knows where to put the canned goods, she called. Sure, Miss Eleanor, I answered, heading up the path to the kitchen door, nearly skipping in excitement. Jack was here, and while I was nervous, I was also thrilled. The idea of going to the movies with him lingered in my mind, 2 hours of just being with him. I knew I wanted to go. Jack was moving back and forth, handing me items to put away as Miss Eleanor relaxed in the living room, watching a home shopping show. I noticed he would always brush past me, just slightly, in a way that wasn't pushy but still made my heart race. I was completely under his spell. As I finished putting things away, I noticed some breakfast dishes and our teacups still on the table. Without thinking, I grabbed an apron, one of those pretty ones that were more for decoration than function, and tied it around my waist. Jack was right behind me, his hands gently caressing my waist and his lips kissing my neck. The sensation sent shivers down my spine. Please stop that, Jack. I need to finish the dishes, and then we can see if Miss Eleanor needs anything else, I said, trying to pull away, but not very forcefully. He smiled and stepped back to look at me, clearly pleased with my appearance. I must have looked like the picture of a 50s teenager, in my dress, stockings, heels, and apron. The way he looked at me made me feel proud to be Emily, and I felt so feminine that I never wanted to wear pants again. No hurry, baby, Jack said with a grin. I've got a surprise for you. My dad let me borrow his car, and we're going to the drive-in. Oh, was my first thought. But then, the second thought distracted me completely. He called me baby, and I felt a warmth spread from my head to my toes. I smiled uncontrollably, but I also knew that if I went to the drive-in with Jack, I would certainly be late for my 9 p.m. curfew. Still, I couldn't resist. I wanted to go with him. I was his baby. I couldn't stop smiling as I finished the dishes, and I was still grinning when I took off my apron, kissed Jack quickly on the cheek, and headed into the living room to check on Miss Eleanor. My, you look happy, dear. Why the big smile? She asked, clearly already knowing the answer. I meant to ask if she needed anything else, but in my excitement, I blurted out. He called me baby, Miss Eleanor, I said, unable to stop myself. She got up from her chair, walked over to me, and put her arm around my shoulder. Without thinking, I started to cry. I had no idea why. That's wonderful, dear, she said softly. He really likes you. She held me and continued, now stop the crying, you'll ruin your makeup. She handed me a handkerchief to wipe my tears. I don't know why I'm crying, I said, still puzzled by the tears. I do, she said with a glint in her eye. You're becoming a young lady, and your emotions are all over the place. It happens to all of us, dear. Nothing to worry about. She patted my head kindly. She was right, my emotions felt like they were in turmoil, and I was more confused than I realized. After I calmed down and wiped away the tears, Miss Eleanor checked my face and said there was no noticeable damage. She then handed me $20 for the day. Now you run along to your young man and have a good time, she said. Next Saturday, if you'd like, bring a nice dress to change into when you're done working. I can even help with your makeup if you want. I'd like that very much, Miss Eleanor. Thank you so much, I replied, wanting her to know how much I appreciated her kindness. You're more like a friend than an employer. She smiled and nodded. Me too, Emily. It's been a long time since I've shared girly secrets. Now go have fun, and next weekend, I want to hear all the details. Especially the juicy ones, she added with a playful grin. I placed my hands over my mouth, pretending to be shocked. Miss Eleanor, I said with a laugh, and she joined in. Now go on, your young man is waiting, and I'm sure he's anxious to start your date, she said with a twinkle in her eye. I was excited to start my date too, even though Jack and I would have some time to kill before the drive-in opened. I jumped up, hugged Miss Eleanor, and nearly ran to the kitchen. Jack was waiting there, standing by the door. He took my hand, and though it was a little embarrassing at first, I quickly became comfortable as he led me outside. After closing the back door, he stopped in his tracks and kissed me again. When he finally pulled away, I needed to hold his hand for support. I squeezed it tightly and, for the first time, felt completely at ease.